Welcome to Courageous Parenting Podcast, a weekly show to equip parents with biblical truth on raising confident Christian kids in an uncertain world.
Hi, I'm Angie from Courageous Mom.
And I'm Isaac from Resolute Man.
We've been married 19 years and have seen the fruit in raising our 8 kids biblically, based on the raw truth found in the Bible.
We can no longer let the culture win the hearts of children. Too many children from Christian families are walking away from the faith by age 18, and it doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way. Join us as we start an important conversation about effective parenting in a fallen world. Hey, welcome to the podcast, episode 41. We just had our 20-year anniversary. And
it was so relaxing.
We had a good time at an amazing resort, and we just talk to each other. We had so many good times talking to each other, having fun, playing in the pool, eating, relaxing. Oh, it was incredible. And, you know, we thought we would do this episode on reflections from our marriage over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And
so
lessons.
We're going to share some of our favorite events, some of the hard events. We're going to share some of the things that we've learned along the way.
Yeah.
And we're also going to share maybe some lessons with you guys that
practical
might be
tips.
Practical tips for marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'll probably learn a little bit more about us as we go. But Thank you so much for being part of the mission, 1 million legacy movement. We want to impact 1 million legacies. We feel like God's called us to do it and to be courageous parents, to equip confident Christian kids in an uncertain world. And whenever you share a social post at Courageous Mom, Resolute Man, Courageous Parenting, you're part of that movement because it's helping get it out there. You share this podcast, you write a review of 5 stars, just tap, 5 stars.
Or even sharing us on social media.
It's a big deal.
You guys, this 1 million legacy is a really big deal because it could be literally transforming future generations, right?
Yeah.
Because what we're teaching is not our opinion, although we have relinquished the rights to our experiences to the Lord for him to use our testimony because it's really his testimony through our life.
Yeah.
And we just want to bring him glory, but we want to encourage parents to be parenting biblically.
Yeah.
And so we are teaching the biblical parenting model in the Parenting Mentor program.
Yeah.
And that has just been transforming lives. It's been
amazing.
Really exciting to hear people's testimonies. But we also really want to encourage your marriages because when we were on our trip, we talked about how intertwined marriage and parenting is.
Really.
And truly, your parenting is 100% affected by how much you are in alignment with your in your marriage with your spouse and vice versa.
Yeah.
Also. And in addition, isn't the best gift you can give your kids a strong, thriving, God-centered marriage?
Amen. Absolutely.
So we want to encourage you guys today with some of the things that we've learned along the way from our mentors and as we have made mistakes and the good things. I mean, because there were some things like, remember the first year we were married and people were constantly telling us, oh, that first year is going to be terrible. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what was our response?
Oh, no, it's going to be good. I mean, we at least had that expectation.
Right.
We're like, no, we're not going to let that happen.
No. And I think that both of us kind of got like a little motivated because people were saying it was going to be awful. And I was like, well, if it's the last thing I can do, it's going to be awesome.
It was
just
awesome.
To spite you.
It was
because
awesome.
It's so discouraging. So like, can I just encourage you guys, if you go to a wedding, do not try to impose your bad experience on somebody else thinking that everybody has a bad first year because we didn't have a bad first year. Although we had some really hard things like I got pregnant 4 months into it, which was a blessing. But
you were
sick. Guys, I was
running
sick.
a new business and
you were working like 100 hours a week.
Finances were tight.
Oh, crazy tight. Because,
we had a fold-up table in our dining room table for a while.
Right.
Like
I mean, all of our money
table.
we invested in our business when we were first married. We decided to really like hold back and not
office
spend.
Chairs.
Remember how we were like, we're going to save and we're not going to ever buy anything on credit. And we're going to buy good quality dining room table. And, we had these expectations. We're like, we're going to buy one and we're going to have it forever. It's going to be an heirloom. It was kind of like our perspective. And so we did without. For years, we had fold-up table and fold-up chairs.
Yeah.
And then your dad made us an amazing
We have it right here.
table.
You can't see it.
You
it's
can't
right
see it,
right.
but okay. So you guys don't know this about Isaac. I'm just going to throw this out there because we love you, Jim. Mm-hmm. We love you, Jim Tolpin. Isaac's dad is a woodworker, but he is not just a woodworker. He's an author. If you Google Jim Tolpin, he's written like 18 books, hasn't he, Isaac?
I think so. Something like that. I mean,
he's in his industry. He's like the guy. He's pretty sweet. But we didn't know this. So on our wedding day, he had made us that little model table that was the tiny version. It was like not even Barbie size. It was like a little bit bigger than a Polly Pocket size table.
Yeah, and we're like, oh,
and it was
cool.
cherry wood, and he had like sanded it and oiled this little table that for years Kelsey played with that with her little Polly Pockets, and it was a little table in her dollhouse.
Yeah.
But you guys, so we get this gift, and it's this tiny box, and we open it, and we're like, oh, thanks. What's this little table? And he's like, well, I'm making you a dining room table. We've had it for 20 years. It's sitting right here. It's a little smaller than our family
needs. I don't think any of us expected our family to be family of 10. So now it's a desk.
Yeah. We absolutely love it. It's hand-planed cherry wood table. Yeah. I think he spent 100 hours making it.
It's beautiful.
It's really amazing. So anyway, but that's just a little inside thing. You can find Jim on Instagram. You guys would probably, those of you who like to make things out of wood will find his Instagram very intriguing.
So right in the very beginning, by the way, we worked really hard together. And before we were married, the 4 months before, I just graduated college. She was on summer break, and we got this business going, and we had a lot of impact on young college students and so forth. It was really fun. And then we got married. 4 months later, pregnant. We were going to wait 2 years.
Yeah.
And we weren't going to have a big family.
No. That
wasn't the plan.
No, we didn't really have a plan.
I mean, in my head, I had 2 years or 2 kids at some point, some distant future.
It's so fun to talk about this 20 years later, you guys.
But, but then God really blessed the business side. I was still working. Frankly, I was working too much. I was out of whack in terms of priorities.
So can I just ask you, can you share, do you have regrets about how much you worked the first 5 years we were married? Because in the first 5 years, we had our first 3 kids.
I absolutely think I worked too hard. Were there fruits from the labor? Yes. We did very well. Did it land me a position running Washington, Oregon 2 years into our marriage? Yes. And that was a big deal.
That was the first year of really working hard landed you that job.
Yeah.
For the second year of our marriage.
Was a short.
In the first 5 years,
it was a short stint, but it was, I was learning a lot. It was a big responsibility at a young age, and it took a lot of work. But you know what? I do wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I worked smarter and knew how to do that. I didn't quite know how to do that then. I was right out of college, big responsibility.
Yeah. You didn't have a business mentor back then either.
Yeah.
Right. And so like we were both eager and looking for a marriage mentors / like biblical man, biblical womanhood kind of people that could disciple us. And we were very blessed to find those. I've had many in my life. Yeah. You have had a few in your life as well. Yeah. Really blessed to be with one guy for like 12 years, right?
Yeah.
And also named Jim, different guy. Yeah. And we've had a lot of really good Jims in our life.
A lot of good Jims. I'll tell you, you men, you need to have a mentor. You need to have godly men that have been down the road you want to go and that can speak into your life.
So that's actually, we're just kind of playing this by ear, but I would say this would be action step or tip number 1 on how to really set yourself up for having a strong marriage is to have mentors.
Or pastors. Pastors are great mentors if they're going to give you the time.
If they're going to disciple you.
Yeah.
If they're not going to disciple you, you can't count that.
Right.
Actually, if you're just going and sitting in a sanctuary
I listen to his sermon every Sunday. No.
Nope. He's not discipling you. What we're talking about is personal accountability.
Yeah.
In real life, face-to-face communication.
And you have to tell him or her, ladies too, super important. You can ask me anything, and I promise I will answer honestly.
Yeah. But you have to commit to that before you can say that, obviously.
Yeah.
Another thing that I just want to throw out there that's really important, since we're talking about this, I have taught a lot on mentoring and teaching in my past years when I did mentor coaching. And one of the things that I really warn women in is that when you ask someone to be their mentor, you need to look at the fruit in their life first.
Yeah.
And if you can say, I want my marriage to look like theirs,
I want my kids to look like
and I want my kids to look like their kids, then they're the kind of person that you would want to be discipled by.
Yeah.
If you can't say that, then they're probably not the right person.
Now, I've had business mentors where the family life maybe wasn't as good, but the business side was really good. Mm-hmm. And you know what? I can get some business wisdom out of that, but don't be the person that asks them for the family wisdom. Okay. You need to make sure the fruit's there.
Yeah.
And so you can have different people, because sometimes it's hard to find it all in one, especially if you're in business.
Yeah. And so there have been seasons where we've had different mentors for different aspects of our life. Mm-hmm. Like someone was mentoring me in marriage, but then I was also meeting with somebody to talk about business and social media and how to do online ministry and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And so there are different seasons for different things, and that's okay. And sometimes you can actually outgrow those relationships as well.
Now, you're probably wondering, how do you find these people? Well, that's your job. First, pray about it. Mm-hmm. Ask God for them. Put yourself where the eagles fly.
Where people who are going to be intentional, purposeful with their life, you see them
biblical truth.
Yeah, they're living biblically. Oh, look how in tune we are.
Yeah.
I know. So anyways, I just think that it's an important conversation for you and your husband to have, but also, can I also just exhort you that if you are looking for the mentor, it's actually your responsibility to reach out and pursue that person.
Yeah.
It's not the mentor's responsibility. However, biblically in Titus 2, God does command the older women and older men to be discipling the younger men and women. And I think that if you don't know that scripture, then you most definitely need to go and read Titus Chapter 2, because it has made a huge difference in our marriage over the last 20 years.
Absolutely. And guys, on the working hard, hustling in the beginning, just remember in the beginning years, even though the kids won't remember very much, they're being formed by your influence or lack of influence. So that's just really, really important. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thankful that Angie did such a great job. I was present when I was home, but that it did not end up harming my kids, but it could have if I kept the pace I was going.
Right.
So that was really, really important. I want to take a moment and give you something for free, if you haven't got it already, is the Date Night One Sheet. It is a beautiful document you can download that will have some key questions on it for your date night to just get in alignment about what's most important for your family. No matter what time of year, it's always important to recalibrate. You can get that by going to courageousparenting.com and subscribing to our mailing list. Also, you can get all of our show notes and everything at courageousparenting.com. And I also just want to share real quick about the Parenting Mentor Program. So many families are being transformed by going through this. It's the 6-week self-paced program with live engagement from us and even direct interaction. So if you want to join us, here's a little bit more about it. And you can find out more at courageousparenting.com.
Steve and I realized that we were getting too comfortable with the world's vision of how to raise our children.
What Angie and Isaac have done in creating this is literally phenomenal.
This program provided awesome scripture-based teachings and just some really great practical applications.
This class has just really rocked my world.
It has given me a vision for not just the different things that we might focus on as parents who are trying to raise our kids biblically, like how our kids are behaving or what we're doing with discipline, but also the things of the heart.
We now have a game plan to how we want to raise our children. We have so many answers to the questions that have been in our mind.
It's not just these hypothetical situations, or it's not just this, here's what I think you should do. It's, let me show you where in scripture this is.
Do your legacy a favor and yourself a favor, and just do it.
One of the best things that we've done this year, one of the best investments we've made this year, and I could not recommend it more.
We're no longer fearing dark days ahead, but we're so excited to raise lights, to be leaders for the next generation.
Now, education. The kids get a little bit older. Pretty soon, Kelsey's ready to go to school, and we put her in
preschool for like 2 months.
Yeah.
And we shared a little tidbit of this on should Christians be celebrating Halloween. We shared a little bit of that testimony because we put her in preschool and then we pulled her out because of that experience, actually.
And then she went into first grade at a Christian school, and you can look at a different episode on 11 Reasons Why We Homeschool for that.
Oh, right. Yeah, we shared that testimony.
But we ended up deciding to homeschool. And that's been an incredible
journey.
Tough road.
That's right.
I will tell you, ladies, many, many, many times my wife has said, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I
think I did that every year we started a new year. So with with your oldest, this is how it kind of works. Okay. First time you're doing kindergarten, you're like, oh, am I going to screw them up? What if I can't teach them how to read? And then first time you do second grade, or first time you do fourth grade, first time you do every single year is a first time that you're ever doing that new thing.
Yeah.
And it requires vision. It requires, you have to decide a curriculum. There's all kinds of things, right? Sure. So there's many different reasons why a woman would feel incapable or inadequate or scared.
And guys, if you're not encouraging her and believing in her, it's a tough thing to do. And so, and why did we do it? Well, we just weren't seeing the fruit from the public education and the private Christian schools either.
And we tried, you guys. Can I just say we tried so hard. We looked and looked and looked.
So we had a vision. We had a vision. This is another tip. You got a vision for your legacy. We had a vision for our legacy. We wanted our kids to be believers. Of course, there's no guarantee of that no matter what you do, but there's greater chances if you do better things. So we want them to be believers. We want them to have great marriages. We want them to have families and be devoted to that.
We actually really wanted to like them.
We wanted
to have a close relationship with them, and we wanted them to have a close relationship with their siblings. And so, but I have also known homeschool families where it actually ends up being the opposite. And so just because somebody homeschools doesn't mean that they are qualified to be your mentor. You need to really look at the fruit in their lives.
Yeah, there's many things to equip kids.
But it has been a journey because our oldest is 19, and I was kind of doing some homeschool stuff with her when she was 3 when we pulled her out of preschool until that first grade. So for a few years, preschool, kindergarten, and throughout the summers, I was doing homeschool.
What's so cool about it is you can instill the love of learning in the direction they're wired by God to go. That is the biggest thing, in the flexibility. You can go look at the other podcasts for that, but it's been a journey, and we took it 1 year at a time. We, she had a lot of hesitation about teaching high school and those kinds of things.
I always felt so inadequate, and I think that it was just the lies from the enemy and the culture for sure. But I would not have kept going if it wasn't for the encouragement of my husband. And so I think it's just really important that people hear that, because even the strongest of women need to be encouraged. And so that's a good thing. So if you're a husband, you're listening to this and you think you're married to a strong wife, just remember she can still benefit from your encouragement.
And hey, I was completely against homeschooling until we did it. I was completely
and I didn't want to.
I thought they were going to be socially unaware. They wouldn't have good friends. They wouldn't be prepared for college. They wouldn't be prepared for the world. I was completely wrong on every single account, by the way. In fact, our kids are so well adjusted, so socially strong, and ready for the world. And Kelsey's killing it at school, doing great.
Yeah, all the kids are killing it per se. But no, I think that it's interesting looking back, because I had the fears that I had were things that other people imposed upon me. It wasn't just me. You know what I mean? But I did have my own expectations of things, and I kind of had to detox off of my own educational.
What's so-and-so going to say if I start homeschooling?
Right. Oh, and I got a ton of that because we were one of the first ones in our community. I mean, there were a couple people that we knew that were homeschooling, but it wasn't like, we're talking almost 20 years. 15 years ago, 16 years ago.
So that's been a major part of our last 20 years. Frankly.
Yeah, because it's a lifestyle choice. And so it drastically alters your lifestyle.
It actually frees you up to be able to travel. Let's talk about RV trips next.
Oh, yeah. You guys, in the last 20 years, we've had some really killer RV trips. But can I just say, so a lot of you are probably going, RV, why does this family have an RV? What's that about? And so we had 5 kids, 7 and under.
Yeah.
Talk about hard to travel. Okay, so Isaac has family in Maryland and in Virginia. And from the time that Kelsey was a baby, we used to travel. We would fly over to the East Coast with the kids until the last trip that we made was when Drew was little. He was our 4th.
Yeah.
And it was so hard. You had a conference on the East Coast that you stayed there for, and I flew home with the kids, and 2 of them were sick with the stomach flu. They literally came down with it in the airport flying home. But I had 4 kids with me that were under 6 years old, and I was flying from Virginia back to Oregon.
Then, I mean, there wasn't Airbnb back then, but still.
And there wasn't Uber.
When we would just go to the coast, the Oregon coast, we would pack up our car, barely fit in it, and then we would get our hotel room. Or sometimes we would rent a house.
And I would go in with the kids, and I'd stay there, and you'd go back and forth,
back and forth, unpacking everything, back and forth. I'm like, this is crazy. I'm packing everything in. And then it's like a couple days later, what do you have to do? Pack it all up. Pack it all back in the van. And I'm like,
so can I just say, like, those experiences when the kids were so little, and plus, like, the driving, can I just say, like, the
bathroom breaks,
2-hour
constant,
driving for stopping to change diapers, stopping to potty break, stopping to breastfeed, stopping to eat, stopping to snack. Like, she's car sick.
Why did we ever leave home again? I don't know.
This 2-hour road trip is now 6 hours one way.
Oh man,
it was so rough. It really was rough. I mean, but that's what everybody did, like, before us, right?
Well, that's what people still do, honey.
Right, except but most people don't have this many kids, right?
That's
like
true.
Most people would stop at 2, so then they have like 2 potty breaks.
Well, then there's
5.
occupancy occupancy laws.
Oh, right, the fire
you can't
codes.
actually rent a house, or unless it's extraordinarily expensive.
Well, a lot of people wouldn't even remember when we used to try to go to Port Townsend to visit family.
We couldn't even rent a place.
Even rent a house because they're like, "Oh, you have 5 kids? How old are they?"
Oh, yeah.
So they wouldn't rent to us.
I would have to use my influence skills, and finally I would eventually get somebody.
Get something. It was so hard, though. Like, the occupancy rates for hotels, though, once we got to like 5 kids, then there was 7 of us, and we had to have 2 hotel rooms if we went anywhere.
With connecting doors or something.
Well, we're not. Like, sometimes they couldn't get them next to each other. And so, of course, then we'd have to split up. And
so we bought, so we ended up, and it was a time when financial abundance was happening. And so.
And you were speaking, and I was speaking.
So we bought a 39-foot Class A RV.
With bunk beds.
It sleeps 10. And we still, praise God, through all of our challenges, we still have this thing. It.
You guys, so actually, this RV became a way to support our family when the business failed. Yeah. That summer, we rented it out so many times. It brought in like $30,000 in one summer. Praise God.
It became a business asset.
Since,
so it still helps. Well, it brings some money in, not as much as that summer, but
God just really used it that summer.
But we have taken it to LA. To
Grand Canyon.
We
visited Gigi in Arizona.
Legoland. To
SeaWorld,
to Mount Zion National Park.
Oh yeah, so we our first like big trip in our RV was when we went to the Grand Canyon. Do you remember when we got there and there was snow everywhere? There were mountain lion tracks.
Okay, we're going in and it was beautiful, no snow or anything. And of course, I should have prepped a little bit. Okay,
and like looked at
things.
Well, we didn't. There was no such thing as a weather app back then.
Yeah, it's true.
I'll give you some grace.
Yeah, that's true. So we're going. Everything seems fine, and as soon as it's starting to get dark, we start going to the canyon, and all of a sudden it's snowing out of nowhere. And then pretty soon it's like white on the road and there's no tracks.
And then it's like
there's no car tracks going either way. We didn't see a single car.
And then there's an abandoned van on the side.
Do you know what it feels like when you don't see any other cars driving?
And you're in a huge RV, and it's dark. Like, it was 10 o'clock at night. We could not see the actual
And then there's a sign that says view here. So I'm just like, that's a huge cliff right there.
Right, that's a Grand Canyon.
And I'm driving like 15 miles an hour.
We're going to die.
Here's another tip, dads. You probably already know this one. But when you have some fear inside, don't let your family know. So here I am. I'm like gripping it, white knuckle, 15 miles an hour. The kids are up here. And I'm just like.
He's totally okay. And the whole time, Kelsey's like 7 or 8 years old. And she's like, Dad, should we stop? Is that an abandoned van? Are those people okay? The van's off and it's covered in snow.
I'm like, if we stop, might be a problem.
And then we keep driving and we see a watch out for mountain lions sign. Yeah. And then all of a sudden he stops and there's tracks right across
or
the
how
front
about
of the
time
RV. And that's when you had to put chains on it.
How about the time
I thought he was gonna
Mount
get
Zion
eaten.
National Park and we're going out a different way and we go up and it's a switchback up this mountain.
It's a one car road, one lane.
It's a switch. Well, it's two, but it felt like one. And so it's a switchback. So and you look out the side of the RV and it's just cliff. Okay. And I'm driving.
Like we're talking
and I'm
100
barely
feet,
making the corners. And at the top, there's a tunnel. What I didn't understand is my RV barely was going to fit through it. And they had to stop traffic. So I would take up both lanes because it was a rounded top.
Yes.
So I'd go through the middle and not
just
hit.
Not
and I'm
hit.
just like.
I thought we were going to die many times on that trip.
We've never died. We're here.
Praise God. We can laugh now. That was a long time ago. That was like 9 years ago.
But when the rewards are always worth it. When we got out of that tunnel, it was like a different world. The rock formations, it was extraordinary. It was so worth it.
Oh, that was an adventure.
Anyways, then last summer, moving forward here, we did a 3-month trip around the country.
Oh, you guys!
And we saw 34 states. We saw.
Okay, we went everywhere. I mean, we
we'll
went
have to do a whole
Yellowstone.
episode on that.
Yeah, we went to Yellowstone. We went down through Cheyenne.
We were at 4th of July.
Wyoming,
We were in New York City. We went up the whole East Coast.
Okay, yeah. So we eventually got over to Charleston, and then we went down to St. Augustine, Florida, and then we zigzagged all the way up the East Coast for a month. Yeah. And we stayed at beaches. We got to see the Creation Museum, the Ark Encounter.
And God was all over it. I met this old guy at Starbucks because I was still
he was working like 40, 60 hours a week. Yeah.
And he goes, and he just kept talking to me, and I'm like, okay, just, focus on him. Stop working. So I did. And we chit chat. And he goes, you know what? You just need to come over. I've got the best beach in town.
Oh, is that the guy in Connecticut?
Yeah. And then,
it really was.
And then I get home and I go, all right, guys, get in. We're going to go to this guy's house. And they're like, what?
I know.
Yeah, God provided this beach to hang out at. And so we went over.
And he's like, oh, here's the life jacket.
He had a little fridge on his beach, and it was legitimately one of the best beaches.
It was a sweet little. They were just an older couple that their kids were all grown, and they were grandma and grandpa.
Had boogie boards. We had so much fun.
It was so great.
They hung out with us.
But that was kind of that is representative of how the whole trip was. Yeah. We met so many neat people on this trip, and I got to do the Courageous Mom meetups all over the nation. Yeah. And it was just fun to meet people face to face and to have those deep conversations with people who are thinking about having more kids but not really sure, to homeschooling, to all kinds of topics.
That's how we travel. If you ever want to know, that's how we do it. And we
in our RV,
and we rent it out, and it's part of how it supports the ministry and supports our family. It's a little piece, but so that's really cool. And our
son runs that business on the side. He helps rent it out, and that supports our family too. If you want to check out, is it
RVRentalsBend.com. So then we also, we've been lucky enough to travel some incredible places by plane. Just us.
Oh, yeah. The first 14 years we were married.
Yeah. And we encourage you to go places. Now, depending on your budget and so forth, but definitely get alone, do some things, experience things together.
You guys, it's really fun to think back on all the places that we went. So the first year we were married, we've seen, let me think. We've been to London and Paris. We've been to Italy, Spain, Argentina. Remember the Rock of Gibraltar?
Oh, yeah.
That was hilarious. The monkeys that were climbing on our car on the Rock of
Gibraltar. Doing the naughty.
Okay, stop. It was a little overboard. But we've been all over the world. We've been to the Czech Republic. We've seen, going into the Jewish cemetery from the Holocaust Museum.
That was crazy.
Well, what was really crazy, so Isaac is named after one of, on his dad's side of the family, one of his ancestors, Isaac ben Luria Tolpin, and we found his name in one accidentally in the, we were looking for it when we were in the Jewish, the Holocaust Museum in Prague. Mm-hmm. And then we found it right there, and that was kind of trippy. But
I think it was accidental in my head, but anyways.
I was like, I was looking for it because I knew all the stories. But just going into those old churches in Italy.
Oh, Italy was incredible.
And
the Colosseum, Rome.
Yeah, and the vineyards that we got to see.
That inspired the vineyard years, which maybe we should talk about that. The reason we had a vineyard on our property, we actually remodeled another thing is do some projects together. It's good. A lot of people say, oh, the worst thing you could do is remodel a house together or something like that.
It actually was fun.
It was really good for our marriage. Yeah. It was really powerful. And
well, when you say it was good for our marriage, so we're kind of weird because we view good as anything that exposes things that need to grow and be refined and sharpened.
Yeah. We understand that we're going to have to grow when we do things, but that's kind of the purpose.
So when we hit hard times, our perspective is how can we both grow through this?
Yeah.
Right? Like if there's conflict between us, we're like, okay.
Because our hard time's going to happen for you. Absolutely, they're going to happen for you. And if
we don't know what they're going to be.
If ahead of time you're not prepared to put God first and to have the right perspective of how you're going to approach that together, then it could be detrimental to your marriage.
Yeah,
but it could. In our case, it's always helped our marriage.
Right, but yeah. So here's another tip. Just be humble. Pride will kill your marriage.
Yeah.
And really, what's the point?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I get it. Like in the moment, it's hard to say I'm wrong or you're right, but really it just doesn't matter. And once you admit it, it actually feels so good.
Yeah.
It's almost like the enemy got you in bondage and it's your pride, right? When you let that go, it's like,
one of the things we used to say to each other, two things I will tell you is, first of all, we're both right. So if we were arguing about something, and if it was, a lot of times when you argue, if you really look at it, there are things that don't actually matter that much. Sometimes they are.
Or you're actually saying the same thing, but in different ways.
In different ways because you're wired differently. And
or you have different definitions of things.
So we just go, oh, we're both right. We don't necessarily say that anymore, but we said that a lot in our early years. And I think it formed into just an understanding of that we don't need to be right. And that's helped our marriage. Another thing is you're not the enemy. It's just proclaiming, when we're arguing, sometimes you can feel like, why are they feeling like the enemy right now? Well, there is an enemy and it's not your spouse. And understanding that's really important.
Yeah, that's been one of our key phrases from the beginning.
Yeah. So the remodel of the house was fun. It was a 4,200 square foot home and we did a vineyard on the side of it and it was gorgeous. It was so much fun.
We didn't do that right away. So we remodeled the home and then we started slowly building the garden.
Yeah.
Which was, at first it was that I wanted to have a garden, but also this is a homeschool co-op opportunity. And so we invited people from the church that we were part of and the co-op that we had and everybody participated and gardened together. And that was really fun. And then the next year that grew from 1 garden box to 4 garden boxes with a white picket fence and grapes. And it was really beautiful. And then we added chickens.
Yeah.
And at the time, Kelsey was 5, almost 6 years old, and she was fully in charge of all the chickens, all 21.
Sold eggs.
And that was a really great experience for her for the 9 years that we lived there.
Yeah.
And we had a dog that we also got before I had Drew, our 4th. I was pregnant with him when we got Moses, and we had him for 9 years. And so the kids were able to experience taking care of animals and all of that.
And the reason for the vineyard is we had the space there. Nothing was happening with the land on the side of our house. And we wanted our kids to experience really living on a farm and having to work hard and doing something they could grow up with because vines never go away. They get older and older and older.
When we were choosing a crop, there were a few different things that we were looking at. And I mean, obviously at the time you had a different job too. And so what you were doing for work, your busy season was usually when it was harvest actually. Yeah. And with the vineyard, when we would need to be pruning and vine dressing, ended up working out with your work schedule. Yeah. So there was that element to it, but also just the idea that if we're going to be planting something and we already were thinking legacy and leaving a legacy was a huge message that you and I were doing visioneering together as a married couple on for years. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be cool, even if we don't end up staying here, that these vines will probably always be here. These are actually
and they
a
are
legacy.
Still there. We sold the place, but it's still there.
Yeah, it's neat. They're taking really great care of it. They ran with the vision that we had. We had set up a area that was supposed to be for weddings and different things like that.
But we wanted the kids to experience that. And some of my best thinking was in the vineyard, was literally just pruning in the vineyard. It was an incredible experience. And, you might think about what can you do together as a family? Yeah. Maybe not so big as a vineyard, but maybe you can do something.
Right.
And what can you do together?
Because work ethic is not something that kids learn in a day. It's not something they learn by going and doing it 5 or 10 times. Work ethic is taught by daily, incrementally doing the same thing over and over again, even when you don't feel like doing it. Yeah. And when you have a responsibility like a farm or a crop of some sort or animals, you learn that. Yeah. And you learn responsibility on a whole new level. And I really do think that at least for our first 5 kids, that was a huge shaping experience for them. It was shaping for me. I'll be honest. There were days when it was pouring down rain in Portland and I did not want to be out there pruning, but we had to get it done before the frost came in. Yeah. And so it was good for us.
Now, as far as kids, people probably want to know, so how did that transpire to 8 kids over all these years? And so, we had a couple kids. Actually, Austin didn't come around for 3 years and we thought something was wrong. Yeah. And so, but nothing was wrong, evidently.
Well, I did have the emergency appendectomy when I was 10 days pregnant with him. And
he's a miracle baby.
He is a miracle baby. The doctors tried to get us to terminate that pregnancy. He has quite a testimony. He was born with a hole in his heart and God healed that as well. And there's
they thought there would be no chance that Austin would survive.
No, because
we're pro-life. Come on.
Yeah, it obviously was not an option. That's kind of an interesting story. Maybe we'll share that another time. But after 2, you were done. Yeah. And I felt like somebody was missing, but I didn't want to push you overboard, right? Sure. Like we were still in the first 5 years of our marriage and you were really working hard to build a business. You were driven. And I was trying to figure out what biblical submission looked like in regards to this practical area of my life of how many kids are you going to have, right? Yeah. And that we obviously had a disagreement at that point. It wasn't a verbalized disagreement. It was more like my heart felt like someone was missing and you were just done. Yeah. And I
was so selfish.
And you just didn't think about it, I don't think.
I was just selfish. I was thinking weird things like, okay, when our youngest kid is 18, how old will I be? Okay, then that's when I get freedom.
You were really thinking that way?
Yeah, I didn't tell you, but in my head, that's what I was thinking. Oh, wow. I used to, the most selfish thing sometimes I would think about. And you know what? You should never not have kids because of selfish reasons. And that's what we came to.
I mean, ultimately, that was definitely a huge convicting factor right there is, well, why am I saying this? Why do I not want a kid? And then being introspective and verbalizing it out loud is very powerful. Because when you hear yourself say the reasons why you don't want another kid, it's just convicting. When you love the Lord, it's just convicting.
So we had another kid.
So then we had Megan. And right away, you were like, oh, we're a good team at this. We can have more.
Let's keep going.
And then I'm like, well, I only thought one was missing. And then
we didn't agree.
But that, when Megan was born, that was the first time I had a little bit of postpartum depression. Yeah. Because you were working really hard and I was outnumbered. I have 2 hands and I had 3 kids under 5. Yeah. And you were working hard. Back in those days, the first 14 years that we were married, you traveled a lot. Yeah. And in the first time, I would say until we had Drew, our 4th, I would actually travel with you sometimes. Yeah. And
we would try and integrate it. And I'd bring a kid with me to work. And even though I was working hard, I did do a diligent effort.
The kids saw you, Austin would put a suit on and go to work with Dad. And we did a lot of hospitality a lot of hosting things at our house where work people would come to our home.
Work and ministry sometimes, yeah.
And work was our ministry, you know. For us, that's actually another tip, is that you don't compartmentalize the different areas of your life, but instead you view your marriage as the ministry that God has given you first, and you ask the questions of how can we complement one another to be fulfilling the Great Commission, partnering with God in the Great Commission.
Yeah.
And when you do have that perspective, then all of a sudden your life is opened up in a different kind of way to people in work, people in church, people in your neighborhood even.
Yeah.
And so
so we ended up coming to the conclusion that if we don't both agree, we're not going to do anything permanent.
Oh, you're talking about having kids.
But I did have a vasectomy appointment and I didn't show up.
No.
And I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad I didn't do that. And we were in agreement to have me do that at the time.
Yeah. After our fourth was born, I was done.
Yeah.
My perspective was, I can't do this. There's nothing more I can give.
It might kill you.
Yeah. I mean, I just was so sick having HG during the pregnancies and puking 14, 16 times a day with each of the kids, and it was hard to take care of the other kids and homeschool them, and I felt like something had to shift, and that was actually why we put Kelsey in school for first grade too. That was part of it, was that I was pregnant with our fourth, and he was born right the first week of school.
This was one of the best periods of time though, because it really made me realize, okay, she really needs me more. If I don't become even more purposeful and I stop working so much, then we can't have more kids. And it's not that I wanted more kids. It's that I didn't want to disobey God.
Right. It was that you didn't not want more kids.
Right.
Actually.
And I didn't want, and I understood children were a blessing. And I didn't want it to be because of me working too much and not supporting her enough that we couldn't receive God's blessings.
Ultimately, what we had talked about over and over again was at the end of our days, we want to look back and not have regrets on the big things in life.
Yeah.
Like, sure, maybe we make bad business transaction or a bad decision here or there.
We made the most important decisions, right?
But when it comes to life or death situations, we never wanted to have any kind of regret that God would be like confronting us on, right? Yeah. Like, we wanted to be building our treasures in heaven. And so
I adjusted. I adjusted big time, but you know what was cool? Is God gave me wisdom on how to grow the business while working less.
That was actually when the business started exponentially exploding financially.
It was unbelievable. And I started working less, but I had to defy the way of doing things compared to the environment I was in.
Right.
And I had to really, really change things. And God gave me the wisdom. I cried out to God and he gave me the answers.
But you also worked really hard. I mean, I remember that year was you had started taking Fridays off and you were having your learning day. Remember, you were working 4 days a week, and then Fridays you would take Austin to a coffee shop with you and do homeschool with him.
It was a normal work. Read. It was actually really normal work, and it included me, having creative time and do these.
And you went back to Western Seminary for a coaching degree during that time and started doing coaching on the side. You were trying to stay stimulated too, because there was this part of you that was just like, kind of shipping it in a way, and you were like, wanting to be stimulated, wanting to grow outside of your box.
So, but even though I was working less, the business grew to from 5 million to 10 million a year in revenue and these kinds of things. Now, then there were some challenges. After that, left the business I was part of and started another company, and it was a miserable failure in the end. And we learned a lot of lessons, lost everything financially.
Except the RV.
And that was an important experience because I developed some pride. And I just appreciate in our marriage that even when I had nothing, you love me the same.
I feel like it's weird because when I look back on that season, once you decided to, because you were in CEO denial during that time, and we had moved to Bend, and we didn't have close friendships in our life because we had moved away from the ones that we probably thought were the closest. And I felt like I had no one I could talk to about it. And I thought I was losing you during that time. It was really difficult for me.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was losing you to the business.
Yeah.
Actually.
Which in my mind, there was no losing anything. I was just trying to make it work.
Right.
But it was a tough time. And
you were working hard. The pressures of meeting payroll were intense.
And the short of it is we stopped that business. We were financially destroyed, but we weren't destroyed in our faith. We weren't destroyed in our marriage. In fact, all of that just grew stronger. Our marriage grew stronger. Our kids rallied together, and God provided.
It became that once you actually, what I was going to say is that once you actually said no to that, that was actually when things started getting better for me.
Oh, actually. Got it. Yeah.
It was the few years leading up to that.
And what's most important in your marriage? It's more important than money or career or anything.
Which is one of the biggest tips that we cannot stress enough, to not ever let anything come in between your marriage.
Nothing.
Not a person, not a business, not a job offer. Nothing. It has to be one of your highest priorities. And I say one of your highest priorities because obviously God is the number one, and then your marriage, and then your kids. And sometimes you have to look around you and you have to look at the needs of your spouse and your children, and you have to make hard decisions like saying no to the business opportunity or whatnot, to do what God's called you to do first.
Yeah.
And so we just encourage people that if anybody's trying to come in between your marriage, right? Like no bad talking about your spouse ever. That is right there, like hands down. If anyone ever talks bad about your spouse, you can't spend time with them anymore.
Yeah.
That's not a healthy relationship. If a business is coming in between it, you really need to evaluate if it's the right place for you to be. And so, but you also need to seek outside wisdom and have close friends.
You know, what's interesting is I was just a guest on a podcast of somebody that knew, he was in my organization actually 20 years ago, and he's a Christian. And you were talking to him outside a conference. He was a college student back then. And he said that you thought I was going to be a pastor one day.
That's so
and then he just
funny.
said this on this interview, right? And it's kind of a theme that Angie had in her mind, but wasn't in my mind, of someday we'll be doing ministries full time together and, you know, these kinds of things. And what's interesting is God had to take these things away and say, no, you're going to go do this. And so it was the best thing, because now we're doing full-time ministry together. And that's exactly what God wanted. And frankly, it's probably what he wanted a decade ago.
Yeah.
Now, we were doing some ministry together. We did marriage seminars together. We were, you know, officiated some weddings and coached other couples.
Premarital counseling.
We, you know, you had your speaking, you wrote a book and a blog.
Right. That started in 2008, I think. And that was actually, that's kind of a funny story too. But Isaac started a blog and then tried to get me.
Well, I told her, you should start a blog. She's like, oh, no one wants to hear my words. I'm like, oh, you really should start a blog. No. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start a blog. And so I started a blog.
And then he's like, will you edit this? Will you check it? And I'm like, changing everything.
And then she starts her blog because, you know, and then
he goes, well, you should just start your own. And then I'm like, okay, then.
And then I stopped mine because mission was done. I shouldn't have stopped, but I did because she was off and running. And then your book, you know.
Yeah, Redeeming Childbirth. That was a whole nother process. But you know what? I think that it's important. Here's another tip for your marriage, you guys, is that in a marriage, God has given you guys different gifts for the body of Christ, but also for your marriage.
Yeah.
But for the body of Christ in the context that I'm thinking of. And no one knows you better than your spouse. And one thing that has been something that's really powerful for me is when Isaac started calling out the gifts that he saw in me, the other people didn't see in me back in 2008. This was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, encouraging me to write, find my voice, and do ministry in a way that wasn't going to take away from our family. And I would not be who I am today if it wasn't for a husband that was calling out those special gifts in me. And I know that there have been times when I've been able to encourage you in similar ways where I'm like, hey, actually, you're really good at this and this. And it like, because we all have those blind spots.
Yeah.
And we need to be encouraged in who we are in Christ.
Yeah.
And recognize that those gifts are not just for your marriage, but they're for the body as well. And we wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for you encouraging me in that back in 2008. And also, you know, it's interesting is one of the reasons why I started the blog was actually because of the organization you were working with, and all the young wives of the managers were coming to me and they were saying, hey, do you have a blog? And I'm like, what's a blog? They're like, oh, you should start a blog, you know? And so I, you know, just having a ministry within your work and being able to connect with the women that were maybe a decade younger than me. And we had 3 or 4 kids and they were, you know, dating or engaged or just newly married. I loved that.
Now, we've been on an incredible ride, and more recently, this podcast, 250,000 episodes about right now. I'll have to look, but it's pretty close to that.
Oh, downloads, yes.
Downloads since January, you know, over 300 parents through the Parenting Mentor Program. 100% of them have said, you know, admitted that it's changed their marriage and parenting.
Well,
some people have said it's changed, it's saved their marriages even.
Which is crazy because this is a parenting mentor program, but it goes back to like, what are some of the issues why people struggle so much in their marriages when they can't agree on things about parenting and they have issues. And one of the reasons why we like doing that together is because it does bring alignment.
And so it's been an incredible ride, and I guess if you could get something out of this, it's in the toughest times we've experienced, which we only give you a few, by the way.
Yeah.
There was a lot of very, very tough times and a lot of very, very good times. But it's the tough times we learned the lessons and we became stronger. Our family became stronger because God was at the center, and we weren't taking credit in the good times. And, you know, that helped us. And so I think it's super important, and we're just so thankful to be on this journey right now. And church planted about 4 months ago with a couple other families, and God is totally blessing that too. And so we just encourage you to communicate with each other, because we just spent 24 hours together without kids, and we had breakfast the first morning, and then we just sat by the fire and talked for 4 hours straight, and it was awesome.
It was actually from 9 o'clock until 1. It was. And then you're like, whoa, Ange, we got an appointment. You gotta go.
We never run out of things to talk about.
No.
And I think part of it is that I keep growing and you keep growing.
Yeah.
And we keep growing in the Lord too.
Right. And so we're just, and we're dreaming together, and we're talking about things, and we're spurring one another on. And you guys, that is in essence a thriving marriage. When you go out on a date and you're excited to talk to each other, and you have a million things that you want to talk about that aren't related to maintenance talk. Yeah. Although that's important at times too.
Yeah. Right? So nourish your marriage. It can be incredible. It can have such a huge impact in the world. It is the catalyst for impacting your kids, an example to them. So we hope this has encouraged you. And
if it has, leave us a comment, share the podcast. And we just love to hear from you guys.
Hey, thanks for listening to this episode. We wanted to quickly tell you about our 6-week online parenting mentor program.
Isaac and I created a powerful biblical curriculum. Here's how it works. Each week, Isaac and I release a video with a downloadable parenting packet to make it easy for you and your spouse to incorporate those teachings directly into your parenting.
It's an incredible program where we cover everything from obedience, training, to overcoming mistakes most Christians are making. But more than that, it's an incredible community. You'll have access to our private online group, live webcasts, and the Courageous Parenting text message line, where Angie and I can send you weekly encouragements straight to your phone.
If you're interested in joining our next online parenting mentorship program, secure your spot now at courageousparenting.com. That's courageousparenting.com.